Hey everybody, in this video I'm going to go over some of the beginning destructive editing techniques that you can use, cropping, and more overall transformative um, techniques that you can use to begin editing your photos. In the next video I will talk about some destructive retouching techniques that you can use, but this one will just be mostly the first steps that you would get into when you've got a batch of photos to edit. So I have my Hereford Road folder open. I'm in my original photos folder, and I want to work with these two photos. So I'm going to hit Shift and select these two files, right click, open with Photoshop. I already have another image opened up, same salon, but a different angle. And I'm going to edit both of those photos. The first thing that I'm going to look at and decide is which of these two photos I want to work with. They're the same subject, but they are taken a little differently. And I've already decided that I'm going to work with this image because my lines are fairly straight or straighter in this image. Things are cropped a little more over here versus this one where I have just a little more space that I would probably end up cropping out anyway. So I'm just going to X out of that image file. I'm going to go to File, Save As. This should be one of the very first things that you do. And I'm going to save this as, we'll call it Hartford Hair Company. And I'm going to save it as a Photoshop document. So I'm not working on the original file. That original photo lives in that folder and doesn't get touched. I just make a copy from it and work on the copy. That's super important. You don't want to compromise that original file. So I've made a copy. This is another copy that I'll work on too. So again, just not working on that original photo. You also want to unlock your background layer. This is your layers panel. If you don't see that open, go to Window and make sure Layers is checked and unlock that. If you don't see your rulers at the top and side, you can hit Command R and that toggles them on and off. I want my rulers on because rulers are great for dragging out guides. So if I click on that ruler on the left, I can drag out a vertical guide. And if I click on this one, I can drag out a horizontal guide, which is wonderful, especially when working with photos of architecture or things that are supposed to have right angles. You can use the guides to illustrate those angles for you and then use the transformative tools that Photoshop has to offer to manipulate your photo from there. So if I zoom in using Command plus, I've set this guide up along this edge and this building is pretty straight except for this top edge. So I'm going to use a tool to straighten things out. Especially your main subject of your image, especially when it's architecture, you want right angles, you want straight lines, you don't want any perspective distortion, and that's why we use a lot of these tools right off the bat just to kind of do some broad strokes editing. So let me zoom in a little more. Also, if you don't see your guides on, you can go to View and make sure that that you have that guides you're going to be able to see them. Show guides, grid. I'll show you the grid there too. You can also turn your snap on. I'm going to leave that off for now. All right, so first tool that I'm going to use over my toolbar is the ruler tool, which if you don't see it, it lives under the eyedropper tool, so you might see that in your toolkit. select your ruler tool, and you're going to click at the one side of the edge that you want to straighten, and then guide it over to the other side. You'll see that these controls come up in on your control bar. I'm going to zoom back out using Command minus, and I'm going to hit straighten layer. And we'll watch that transformation happen. And so you can see that things were straightened out a little bit. So this is a 90-degree angle. That's what I'm looking for. From there, and you can always move your guides out of the way, so I think I'm going to move them for now. From there, I've got to figure out, okay, now I need to crop out some of this space. This is, kind of too many lines. I don't really need this much space in the foreground, so I'm going to use my crop tool, which is right here, which is going to trim the image. And you don't want to go too crazy with cropping right off the bat. You can do some additional kind of placement in InDesign once you place this image in there. So I'm not going to go too crazy. But the nice thing about this crop tool is how things are in a grid, so you can see what's in the center of your image based on what you're cropping out. I'm also keeping in mind that I'm going to be working with a rectangular frame in InDesign, because these are going to be booklets. So I don't want any square photographs. I want to fill up the whole page, so I need to keep some of the verticality. And again, I can kind of adjust more in InDesign once I get there. So once I'm happy, I can hit enter. And I might crop, well, I think I'll leave that. This little line I find a little distracting, and I might go and use another editing technique to get that out. But I'm pretty happy with how this looks overall. I want to show you another option really quickly for adjusting perspective. So if I have, use Command T, that's your transform tool, and then I right click, and I have access to these kind of hidden tools where I can use perspective, I can warp. Let me show you what perspective does. So that's another way to kind of adjust angles, adjust how things are supposed to look square. Just another option for you, and you can kind of play around with what that does. But ultimately, we're looking for straight lines, right angles, no real perspective distortion. That's perspective distortion. This is perspective distortion. We don't want to see that because we don't see that in real life. So I don't want to use a perspective tool right now, so I'm just going to hit escape and kind of go back to where I was. And the last thing that you can do is go up to image size. We're going to check how big this thing is. So we want our resolution to be 300 ppi because we're going to print our booklet out. And we want our width to be 8.5 inches. Okay, so I hit OK, and that's going to adjust the sizing for me. And what I can do now is save my changes. I can hit Command S or go to File, Save, and that saves my progress in the edited folder of my Hereford Road zine folder. So those are kind of the initial first steps that you can take in terms of destructive editing. And again, in the next video, I'll show you some other more destructive retouching tools. So have at it.